Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thanks for joining Real Story Group for today's presentation around best practices for selecting technology in a hurry. My name is Scott Dill. I'm the business development team here with Real Story Group, and our managing director and lead analyst, Jarrod Gingras, will be joining us momentarily to take us through the heart of today's presentation. But I just wanted to kick things off a little bit with an agenda and a quick intro about Real Story Group. First, we're going to start off with some perspective and disclaimers, walk through some tips and best practices, and as time permits, we'll do some Q&A at the end. So if you do have questions at any point during the presentation, please enter those into the GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll either get to those at the end, or we can email you off to the side after today's session. Also, for our subscribers on the line, I see a number of you, so thank you for joining us today. You'll be able to access a recording of the presentation in your subscriber library, and then for all attendees, you'll be getting a copy of the slides over the next couple of days. So thanks for taking some time today. And for those that are new to Real Story Group, we're an analyst firm, and we've been at this for 18 years now, and our primary focus is to detail the strengths, weaknesses of the vendors and the tools that we evaluate. So the way we work with our customers is to really help them through a technology selection, either through self-service type subscription. We can also add advisory time to the subscription, and we take on a number of consulting projects throughout the year where we'll actually come on site and assist as a member of your team, in a sense, through a selection project to make sure you're getting the right fit for what it is that you're trying to do. And that's really the hallmark of our organization and the way that we approach our research. Now, within our evaluations, we cover a number of different technology areas. You'll notice here that we focus on both digital marketing and digital workplace technology. So we're now looking at over 100 different vendors and 150 plus products from these different vendors in the areas such as web content management, customer data platforms, digital asset management on the digital marketing side. And then on the digital workplace side, we look at things like Office 365, enterprise portals, and social collaboration. So as I mentioned, it's near and dear to our heart about selecting technology and doing so in the right way. And that's the crux of today's presentation. And it's also the crux of a book that Jarrod co-wrote with our founder, Tony Burns, about the right way to select technology. So Jarrod, I'll let you take it away from here.
Great, thanks, Scott. And, we'll be talking a lot about some of the lessons that we put into the book, The Right Way to Select Technology. And there's a link on the screen right now. If someone is interested in getting a complimentary ebook copy of this book, you can just go to that link. And if you meet the criteria, we'll be happy to get you a copy. Or you can just get your own hard copy on Amazon or Rosenfeld Media, as always. So, as you might have gathered from the title of the book, The Right Way to Select Technology, we think that there is a right way to do this. We see organizations and enterprises try to select technology all the time. We've been helping and observing this process for over 18 years now, and unfortunately, we see people doing it the wrong way quite a bit. So, what we aim to do in this book is to document what we think is a much better way, the right way, if you will. And in a perfect world, what that breaks down to is about 20 or so steps that across 6 phases. And this is these are the things that we put into the book. But we realize quite regularly that the world isn't perfect, and quite often you may not be able to execute on all 20 of those steps in a perfect order. So to start this presentation off, this webinar today about selecting technology in a hurry, we wanted to start with this disclaimer. So first of all, in general, again, if the world is perfect, we don't recommend taking shortcuts. with any time you speed up a process and you skip steps in a process, there are going to be trade-offs. Okay, and we'll talk about some of those. Now, ideally, you would invest appropriate selection time that is in proportion to the criticality of the technology that you're looking to procure. And so we recognize that not all technology selections are created equal. Some are smaller, some are larger. When we talk about MarTech, we use the analogy sometimes. Sometimes you're buying the anchor stores of your MarTech mall, and sometimes you're buying your kiosks of your mall. So that they're not all technology is created equal. So you don't need to have a 6-month selection process for everything, but let's try to find an appropriate proportional time to the criticality of that technology. But we recognize that sometimes you have to speed it up. And what are some reasons for speeding it up? So I'm sure many of you operate on some pretty strict fiscal calendars within your organization, and for better or for worse, oftentimes your budgets are very much tied to your enterprise fiscal timelines. And so there's certain times where we get calls from people saying, we have this money to spend by the end of Q4, and we know we need a particular type of technology, so we need to hurry up and make sure we spend this money before the year runs out and we lose this money, right? It's just a reality that I'm sure many of you have seen, and it's a reality sometimes you have to adjust to. Another reality is expiring vendor contracts. This is a regular call that we get here at Real Story Group, where people say, hey, my contract with vendor X, Y, and Z is expiring in 6 months, a year, 3 months, hopefully not less than a month, and we're not happy with it. We want to go somewhere else. We want to look for an alternative option. So that can put you under the gun at certain times as well. And finally, critical business initiatives. So certain enterprises come to us quite regularly and say, hey, we have a new product launch, or we have a new strategy that we want to execute on, but our current technology isn't going to get us there. We need to bring technology on really quick so we can execute on the timelines placed with this initiative, or maybe it's a new product, or a new strategic offering that you're putting out there. And to align your technology to those initiatives can be tricky. They're not, the business initiatives don't want to wait for you, and technology can't. You don't want to be, if you're in charge of the technology, don't want to be the barrier to launching new products or being successful with these initiatives. So you need to make sure that you get things done in a hurry in that case as well. So those are some reasons in the real world we get it. So let's talk about 6 best practices that we've identified that you can apply to a situation where you are trying to streamline the selection process. So best practice number 1 is we recommend that you avoid the temptation to scale down your selection team. This is kind of an interesting one because it can be counterintuitive a bit, but we see many organizations who are saying we need to speed this up, and they say, all right, well, let's not get a big selection team. Let's not get everyone's opinion in the process. Let's just do it ourselves and just go find what we think is the best solution for us. And sure, that can help make the process go quick, but it can also lead to disaster in the end, where people don't feel heard from, and maybe you might think that the needs of the organization, but when push comes to shove, or the rubber meets the road, when you roll this thing out, you find very quickly that you didn't meet some needs, and you might have got this project implemented and this new technology implemented quickly, but you got a lot of really annoyed users across your organization. So we highly recommend that you don't do that in sort of a selection in a vacuum, if you will. So instead, we recommend that you keep the team fairly well represented, so that you have holistic representation from across the organization, so that you have the right project champions and project managers in the room. You have the right representation from IT and the business units. You have the right representation from the technical folks and the end users of the project, the information architects and user experience specialists, the right management stakeholders, whether it's in certain organizations might be the CFO or the CIO, in other organizations it might be the CMO or the CEO. Do you have the right regional representation if you're a global organization? Is legal represented? Is compliance team represented? All these things need to be considered so that there's not these gotchas after you hurry up and make a decision. It's going to be tricky enough as it is. Make sure you have the people in the room that represent the needs of the organization. So again, this may seem counterintuitive, but in reality, what it gives you is that better 360-degree view of what it is the organization needs. It also gives you the ability to divide and conquer where it makes sense. So we've seen situations where the needs of the technical, internal technical IT team is very different from the wants and needs of the business units, and so we've seen during like a demo phase with vendors, you actually break out into a technical session and a business session, but you do so in parallel so that you're able to get all your questions answered at the same time without wasting each other's time, right? So that can be a real time saver there, as well as you want to make sure that the real decision makers are in the room. Nothing kills a project more than you think you made the right decision for your organization, then you go try to sell it to your CMO or CEO or CIO or CTO, and they strike it down. So you want to make sure that they feel involved. So as you go through this process in a quick manner, they're able to sign off quickly. You don't have to have additional stages or gates to pass after you make your decision. So best practice number 2 is focus on what makes you unique. Now, if those of you who have followed our methodologies or read the book, you know that this is something that we recommend in all selection cases, but it becomes more critical when you're going in a hurry. Do not go out and try to capture every single requirement across the organization as the first step in selecting technology. There's going to be plenty of time to go out and capture these deep technical requirements. You do not need to start there. Instead, I want you to start by creating some custom use case scenarios that really paint a picture of what it is you're trying to do. So here's an example of someone looking for video and webcasting software, and what we tried to capture here is real actors, real locations and environments, real processes, right? And I'm using that word real over and over again because the key to writing effective use case scenarios that really paint a picture of what you're trying to do is to make them as real as possible. But there's a bit of art and science here. You want to be descriptive without being overly prescriptive, right? You want to leave room for the vendors to be able to understand how or to apply how their technology is best suited to meet the situation that you laid out, but you want to describe the future way of working. So this is a much easier way for you to describe the way you want it to work, the problem that you're trying to solve. And it's also a faster way for vendors to understand what it is that you're trying to do. We've heard from so many vendors who say, when I get those checklists of requirements in our RFP, it's so hard for us to understand what the big picture is here. Sure, we can say yes, we do all these things, but it really is hard for us to really make sense about what it is this organization is trying to do. So if you can strip out some of that ambiguity for the vendors, that will help speed the process up as well. Once you have those scenarios, we're going to use those at various phases, right? We're going to use those as the bulk of your way you go to market and your way you communicate to vendors. You're going to use those scenarios as a way to structure your in-person demos, and we're going to use those scenarios as a way to structure your head-to-head bake-offs or proof of concepts or pilots. And we'll talk about that in the next few best practices as well. But before we get to that, best practice number 3 is, if you're going to speed this up, I don't want you wasting time looking at a bunch of vendors who have no business being on your shortlist. So I want you to create a shorter shortlist. And to do that, you need to be sure that the vendors that you put on your shortlist are fundamentally built to solve the challenges that you're asking them to solve. Okay, in 2019, as a buyer, this is good news, but this is also bad news for those of you in a hurry. You have options. This is our kind of fun, infamous, famous subway map of the vendors that we cover today. It's constantly evolving. We're adding to this list, subtracting to this list as to who we think are the most significant vendors in the markets that we're covering. But again, you have options. There's lots of vendors here. There's lots of vendors who call themselves digital asset management systems or web content management systems or marketing automation systems, but they're not all created equal, as I'm sure you all well know. And while the sales and marketing teams say that they can solve all of your problems, you want to find the ones that were fundamentally built for your needs so that you can get those on your short list and do your due diligence with those guys, as opposed to wasting your time with vendors who may call themselves a DAM or a web content management system, whatever technology you're looking for, but it would take so much more work to get their products to do what it is you're trying to do. You don't want to waste you don't want to spend your time sorting through that. You want to find the ones that were fundamentally built for what it is you're trying to do. So how do you do that? The most important thing that you can do when building a shortlist is self-identify with what it is you're trying to do as a step one. So step one, I'm using digital asset management and web content management as examples here, but this is true for every type of technology that you might be procuring. But let's use digital asset management as an example. Are you trying to do basic brand management in your organization? Or are you trying to do multilingual brand management? Or are you trying to do asset management as it relates to your product set, product asset management? Or are you doing video and audio management? And in those realms, are you trying to do library review and approval or editing and assembly? So wide range of use cases here. You're likely to self-identify with a few of these, but certainly not all of these. No one's trying to do all of these things. And we want you to then say, okay, once I self-identify with these, once I identify which ones are most important to me, I want you to then find the solutions that were fundamentally built to solve the use case scenarios that you identified as most important to you. And so, one of the ways that we work with our customers is and I know the subscribers online certainly know about this, but for those of you who are new to us, we recommend that you use this tool that comes with our subscriptions. It's called the Real Quadrant Shortlist Generator. It's very simple. You self-identify with those scenarios, you give it some weightings, and then we spit out a shortlist that's customized to you and your needs. And that can be a very valuable way to speed up this process so you're not wasting your time with vendors that are just not a good fit for you. Okay, best practice number 4. Skip the RFI, skip the RFP, and go right to an RFD, or more commonly what we're calling it, an RFP&D. All right, a lot of letters. Let's go through some definitions. So a traditional way of going about technology selection for many, many years now is organizations would start with something called an RFI, or a request for information. This is where you'd throw out a document to a long list of vendors, ask them to come back and tell us about their solution. In today's day and age, there's so much information available to you freely, whether it's on their website or in analyst reports like exist in our research. There's so much information at your fingertips. I think going the RFI route is a complete waste of time. The next step in a traditional process is to send out a traditional RFP, or a request for proposal. Here, what you usually ask is for vendors to really read through everything that you're looking for and send back a written response to that request. And you, as a selection team, would go through those responses and then down select to a shorter list and say, all right, who do we want to give us a quote, and who do we want to come in for demo? As you might imagine, all that back and forth takes time. And in order to do this right, you have to give vendors time to prepare. So there's a lot of back and forth and a lot of weeks and months, but certainly lots of time wasted in that back and forth. So what I'm proposing to you instead is to go right to what we call an RFP&D. So it's a request for a proposal and demo. So here what you're doing is you're confident that you have the right shortlist because you did your homework in the previous steps that we described. You're sure that you have that right shortlist of vendors, and you basically grandfather them into the demo phase. So when you contact them, you tell them that they've been shortlisted, number one, and what that's going to do is really get there and get the salespeople at these vendors antenna up right away, because they know that they don't have to waste their time responding to an RFP with the hope to be invited into a demo. They know you're really serious right off the bat. That's good. So what we found is in the RFP and D route is the response rates among vendors is better than if you go the traditional RFP route. And make sure that they know what you want them to do is we still want a proposal, we still want a response, but we want you to come to the table with that proposal as well as a demo in person. So beyond telling them that they've been shortlisted, I want you to be, when you get to the demo phase, I want you to be really strict with how you structure that demo week. So you need to establish firm timelines and rules. You can't have the vendors come in and just waste your time giving you PowerPoint about their company and their roadmap and whatnot, because you've already done your homework. You already know that. You've done your due diligence to this point. What you want to do is tightly script these demos so that the vendors show you your use cases in action. So no canned demonstrations that they give everyone else, very custom demonstrations to what you are looking for. So it's really relevant and a, quite frankly, an effective use of time for the people that you have in the room. So here's an example of some of those strict timelines. When we do this with organizations, and this is a 3 hour and 30-minute one, some of these can be a day-long demo. Some of them can be multi-day. Some of them could be half days like this. But in the half-day example, we want to limit introductions to about 10 minutes. We want to limit your company technology overview to, again, 10 minutes. We want to limit your project plan and solution to a short time frame, something like 15 minutes, but spend the bulk of your time in those demonstrations, right? That's what you should be getting the stakeholders who have spent spending their valuable time with you, probably seeing 3 to 4 of these in a demo week. You want to make sure that they're truly understanding what they're getting into from a product perspective, and the only way you can do that is to make those demos as real as possible. But what you don't want to do is shortchange some of the more difficult conversations, certainly around pricing, to make sure that the assumptions of the vendors are in line with yours, and make sure that any unanswered questions of your stakeholder groups are resolved before wrapping up. So that brings us to number 5. And number 5 is to construct a proof of concept of just the right length. Now, again, if you've been with us for some time, you know that we always recommend taking one last step after your demo week, and that's to do a what we call a proof of competitive proof of concept, or sometimes known as a bake-off. And this is an area of that can be quite controversial sometimes, because to do a proof of concept right, usually you have to devote some time to it. We say usually a minimum of 2 to 4 weeks is what we see these competitive proof of concepts taking. But when you're shortcutting this type of selection process, I don't want you to skip this stage entirely. I want you to get your hands on the technology you're buying, because that's the only way you'll truly know what it's going to be like. But you might need to make it shorter, right? We've seen situations where you can make it as short as 3 days. It really comes down to what's your risk tolerance at this point. You want to make sure there's at least a half day of hands-on training, so that your end users can actually feel what it's like to use this technology. Again, getting back to that concept of dividing and conquering, is there an opportunity to do things in parallel, where your business users do some tasks and your IT stakeholders do some tasks and ask questions in parallel. In cases where you're bringing to the table an integrator as well as the software vendor, you might want to bring them both to the table so that you get a real sense of what it's like to work with both in conjunction, as opposed to figuring out what vendor you're going to work with and then in a serial process, then switch your attention to the integrator and have to go through the whole process again. Bring them both to the table. Do it as a blended selection that can speed things up as well. And then finally, this is an error that I see happen over and over again. So even the most well-intentioned company or organizations who are going through selection processes, even adopting a lot of those 5 other tips that I mentioned, they get to the end of a selection process and then they start to negotiate, and that's where things get bogged down. I know many of you may have budgets of your own to spend, but even in the healthiest budgets, usually there's some pretty complicated procurement processes that need to be followed in order to bring new technology into your organization. And so what I see happening is you go through this process and then your team makes a final decision and then you start negotiating. And what happens then? It gets bogged down in your procurement process, or you might get stuck on some legal language. You might get stuck on some additional modules that they're trying to sell you, and how you're going to phase this out. Technology projects and contracts related to them can be difficult and complicated to structure, so it's going to take time. So as an alternative, instead of waiting till after you select, I want you to start your negotiating a bit early. So I want you to, the minute your people come in and do their demos with their proposals, I want you to be really questioning those. I want you to be challenging the modules that they're putting into their process, into their proposals. I want you to be challenging their timelines. I mean, challenging their assumptions. And what we found is, if you don't divorce the negotiation from the selection, what we found is that everyone's marching towards that partnership at every stage of the game here. And that's a much more effective way of going about this. So much error can happen if you wait till the end. So start negotiating early. It gives you much more leverage in this process. I can tell you, vendor salespeople know they got you when they know that you've gone through a lengthy process or even a short process where there's a lot of stakeholders involved. They know they've got you if you then tell them, hey, you're our leader in the clubhouse, we want to work with you. They have you over the barrel, if you will, and they have all the leverage in that case, and so they're not as willing to negotiate at that point. But if you start the process early, it's more of a making sure that they understand you and you understand them, and limiting risk for both sides, and then again moving closer and closer to an agreement that fits well for your partnership. Okay, so those were 6 best practices. Let's just recap really quickly. Number 1, avoid the temptation to scale down your selection team. Number 2, focus on what makes you unique as opposed to trying to capture every requirement across the organization at this stage in the game. Maybe the most critical is get the right shortlist, and a short shortlist. Don't waste your time looking at vendors that are just not a good fit. Skip the RFI and RFP and go right to an RFD, or more commonly known these days as an RFP&D. Construct a competitive proof of concept of just the right length that fits your risk tolerance. And finally, don't wait to negotiate. Start that negotiating early. And with that, again, I hope you all have very successful selection processes. We'd be glad to help in any way where you see fit. If you need help getting to that short list, we have solutions for you. If you need help negotiating with vendors, we have solutions for you. If you need help with RFP&D templates, that's what we work with our clients on doing. If you need help writing scenarios, we can help with that. Happy to help in any way, but I wish you the best, whether you're going fast or slow in this process. Again, if anyone wants to get a copy of the book, let us know. If you want to get a sense of what the research that I described actually looks like, check that out on, you can get a full chapter from any of our research marketplaces, as well as if you're looking at the real quadrant shortlist builder that I described, you can actually try it for free in any of the areas. So go in and check it out. You won't get the full shortlist necessarily, but go in and check it out. You'll get a really solid sense of what it's like to work with that tool. All right, we're just about out of time. If anyone has any questions, just email me. My contact information's on here. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. In the meantime, best of luck with your selections. Please don't hesitate to reach out if we can help in any way. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.